I'm delighted to say that that's the bad news. This is the good news. We've got the amazing word witch, Kate Salisbury. That's fantastic. And also, well, on these dark wintry days, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, here's a welcome shard of the sunlight. It's Kaylie Finn. Let's see what you're saying. This is from Michael. Hello, Michael. Thank you very much for sending in a comment. If you want to send us a comment, good, bad, whatever, useful suggestion, completely useless suggestion, please do. You know how to do it. Michael says, quite short and sweet. Thank you all so much for the feedback. I really appreciate it, and we appreciate you doing that too. We have no monthly leaderboard today because it's the first show of the month. So let's just have a look at the notice, our parish notice. Huddle, if you're a Litopian, please don't miss our Christmas party this Saturday. It's happening kind of instead of the regular huddle. That's 5 o'clock UK time. Our first submission comes from Mayank Sharma. It's sci-fi and it's visionary fiction. Interesting title. It's called Tutelar. And I'm going to read you Mayank's blurb. Hannah Makinen, a native physicist frantic with the fear of death, transcends to the next world, Mesa, while he thwarts the terrorists' plot against an exploration which redefines the standard model of particle physics. Sorry for the pause there, I'm getting my head around this. On the Mesa, he ends up earning the nectar to live forever and steps up to smite Nagas. I happen to know what Nagas are, actually. And interesting Sanskrit word. It can mean elephant, it can mean snake. The agents of destruction who elude the guardians across realms. But what he will attain back home if he can't give life to his beloved. All right, I kind of slightly struggled through that, partly because I'm still in awe of Richard Branson's extraordinary power from space to screw things up, you tosser. But now let me tell you everything that we know about Mayank. Based in New Delhi, India, I began my writing career, says Mayank, when Better Software magazine, published by Techwell Corporation in Florida, featured my article in 2014. With a breadth of global experience of more than 2 decades and a depth of life experiences from around the world, I embarked on the journey to explore my creative writing talent beyond the software domain. I became a published author of my debut novella in 2017. The encouraging reviews of bloggers on my first literary work nudged me one more step nearer to living the life I'd always dreamed of, being a writer. I recently attended the New York Film Academy's screenwriting program in order to take my storytelling skills to the next level. Good, excellent. And I happen to know that Robert is going to give you a reading that will also take it to the next level.
Tutelar by Mayank, read by Robert. Chapter 1. Loneliness, once my worst enemy, has now become my shadow, Hanu muttered, as he almost lost balance, riding a camel cart in the golden desert. He felt as though a load of several pounds pounded his chest. The squeak of rolling cartwheels, coming from the distance, began to grow louder and louder as a flock of wagon drew nearer. The distant tinkles of bells repeatedly echoed in his ears. Jingle, 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 jingle! A herd of camels decked up in splendid get-up broke into a furious gallop, with snorts and grunts, flouncing out of the sandstorm. Hanu fixed his head upright as it spun while he meandered through the throng of running camel carts. In the radiance of full moon, the vividly decorated camels seemed mesmeric. The bunches of brass bells were hung around their necks, and their humps were draped in the fabric with knitted embroideries. An arid voice with a haunting melody of folk instrument in the background made him stumble all of a sudden. "These are the footmarks of 2 in the sand," the voice reverberated. "But now only one trace goes on beyond this point. Aha! He was your protector. Who left you alone in this simoom?" "Jeez, who am I?" Hanu turned around, trying to recognize the mystifying voice. "Nights, dark nights succeed, every so often in pursuing me to chase him through a twilight zone." As the dust drifted away, a camel chariot carrying 2 chimeras became prominent. The chimeras are partly man and partly serpent. Below the abdomen, they seemed like a giant anaconda. Above the abdomen, the ornate motifs blemished their scaly cerulean skin. They wore gold ornaments, bracelets, necklaces, armlets, earrings, and coronets. They glazed at Hanu, with their wrathful, bloodshot eyes wider than the eyes of any mammal on the earth. One of them swung his sword through the air. The sharp edges of the sword with bloodstains shone in the moonlight. The dunes enigmatically appeared like 1,000 sarcophaguses buried in the sand. He wanted to escape from there sooner than he could, but it was a vain attempt. All he could see was pitch darkness at the far sides of endless desert. A grit abruptly struck one of his eyes. Jingle, 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 jingle. Heaviness pounded his chest. Please, I don't want to die! Hanu shot open his eyes. He rubbed his itchy eyes as his camel cart appeared to suddenly shrink. His feet appeared farther, as though his broad body grew larger by a few inches. The camel, now appearing strangely farther away from him, began to morph into a reindeer. The sand, plunging in the ground, began to morph into snow. He wiped the sweat from his forehead. In the snowpack, he slayed the reindeer ride along with his companion, Maya. She hugged him. You okay? I thought you frozen cold. I hate to feel like Gulliver when this hallucination captivates me. My own eyes deceive me with a strange plea when I fall asleep, camouflaging an unknown corner of my mind. Every time he believed that he understood his existence, life deceived him like the friar's lantern at night. This was not the first time when he was under the delusion that he finally located an adobe where he would be able to seek solace. He travelled around the world, relocated from one country to another, moved from one university to another, searching his existence. It was indeed quite unusual for a young man in his early 20s to desperately make an appeal that his soul shouldn't stay laden with the disquiet till his last gasp. He huffed reflexively, moved on with his trembling lower legs, and wished that there was someone who could help him to untangle this mystical web. A few childlike youthful duos screamed, slaying the reindeer rides. Maya cuddled Hanu, pulling Jacket's hood to protect her ears as they rode on a sleigh, whirring through a dense pine forest. Hey, I'm dreaming, she screamed. A colourful arc of the northern lights soared above, embellishing the dark, wintry skies.
Look at what the Genius Room is saying here. Vic is getting a little confused. Jan says, great world building. I got that sense too, actually. I think it's, my own feeling is there's an interesting world and an interesting story fighting to get out here. Hannah says, it's losing me. I have no sense of character. Vagabond says, did Gulliver's travel exist in this world? Wasn't the sense I got of time and place. Okay. And Galadriel, let's just see what Galadriel says. Some nice touches to the writing, but needs an edit to tighten. I think it does at least. I'm not sure what the story is. Johnny says, competent, but I'm not being captivated. Let's see how captivated you are, Kate.
Do you know what? I think there's a really good story trying to get out of there. Because
I think so,
I did find myself rather confused by the blurb, and I think because there were a lot of long words and names and technical terminology in there, which, when you first pick it up, you get a bit lambasted by, and it doesn't really go in.
Yeah, I find it really hard, actually.
Yeah. And I think the thing with blurb is we get an awful lot on the programme which are, just way too generic and way too vague. But this was the opposite, really. It was trying to be too specific, when in fact I think it actually needed to be a little bit more general in places, just so that we could get a feeling of that there's a universal theme here. Yeah. However, that said, the writer, Mayank clearly knows the sci and sci-fi. That really came across. This is somebody who knows their stuff, and I think there's some really interesting ideas as well that I would really enjoy reading about and seeing explored. The title, I think I like one-word titles, actually. Tutelar is quite arresting because it's unusual.
What's it mean?
So,
do you know what it means?
I don't know what it means either.
It's something to do with teaching, isn't it? No, it's like tutelage, or I don't know. But it's not a bad. It's quite distinctive, isn't it? Actually, I don't know if it's a real word.
It is quite distinctive, and I think for a sci-fi novel that would probably be okay, actually.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but you need a log line underneath it, don't you? You need something to kind of tune in the uninitiated readers to what Tutelar might be talking about. As for the writing itself, again, this is a writer who loves words, and as a person who's into word witchery, as you said earlier on, I'm totally into that, and I really like the fact that the writer really went for the sensory description, not just the visual stuff, but the stuff you could hear, the stuff you could feel. That was great, and I just felt we were getting a bit too much of a good thing there, though. I think we needed to rein that back a bit, because what we weren't getting was enough of a feeling for the character. We were getting lots of feel for the world, and the world, which then was clearly a hallucination, which was a sci-fi take on the it was all a dream kind of thing, wasn't it? But kind of intriguing. That chunk of exposition didn't need to be there. I think we just needed hints that there's something strange. We already knew there was something strange going on, but I think we still need to pursue the mystery of why, and we really need to get to grips with the character. That opening sentence, for example, is very arresting. But I also wonder if it might be a better chapter title, actually, because it was also quite formal, and the way the character spoke was very formal, which might be a characteristic of the character. Okay, fair enough, but it's also quite distancing. So I think there's a good idea there, but the editing pencil needs to come out to really let it kind of grow its wings and fly.
Yeah, Jan, I see this is why they call the Genius Room, right? I haven't yet put a question to them they cannot solve, actually, and that is the defining characteristic of a genius. Jan says Tutelar is a guardian. Okay, makes a lot of sense. I saw you doing a lot of nodding just then, Kaylie. I guess you're in broad agreement.
Exactly the comments that I was going to give as well. I wrote down the kind of prose was the writing was very lyrical, and there was almost a poetry in there. But if we're reading this, for the length of a book, it soon can, it becomes too hard to keep up with almost, which is a shame to say because I love words as well, but it's almost paring it back. I think I completely agree. A little bit too much of a good thing. And we don't want to lose that because it's the sparkle of the story, but just make it easy for the reader. I also agree. I didn't like the opening line for exactly the reasons Kate said there. It didn't feel natural. Even if the character is quite formal, I'm still not convinced that's something someone would say to themselves. So there's some, creative license in storytelling, but we still want to make it relatable for the reader. And again, just to kind of have a consensus with what's being said, it's exactly it. When we're reading or getting to know sci-fi and fantasy, it's all stuff that we're not familiar with. As the reader, we're dealing with the unfamiliar, so you have to make other areas really easy for us while we become introduced to these new worlds, which is, of course, the joy of reading. But if it's too complex, it's, again, kind of a bit too confusing sometimes. But I enjoyed it, just needs a bit of an edit, is the bottom line.
There you go. I just want to say, Mayank, two things really. I mean, I can't add anything to what's already been said. So maybe if you're not joining us live, then you should just stop it now, rewind, and listen to what people are saying, and particularly pay attention to what the Genius Room is saying as well. I want to say, do not send submissions in any colour other than black. We get lots and lots of strange submissions in the industry, agents and publishers, and it usually says this is a crazy person, actually. So don't do that. That's a very bad thing to do. Just do it, nice, professional presentation, but don't go overboard with the colours or anything a little bit weird. Just straight down the middle. That does the job. And I agree. I just want to echo really what's been said. I think you've got a very interesting imagination. You're doing some interesting world building in your head. You got to learn some basic tricks. Some of the tricks here that, it's not actually rocket science. Just learn some basic storytelling tricks, as you've already tried to do. And I think we will find that things rapidly take off for you. But what we can do is judge what we're seeing at the moment. So let's see how the numbers are working out. Genius Room likes the title. Everyone likes the title, giving about 60-ish. Blurb, Genius Room really didn't like that. Actually voted lower than me, and I'm normally quite realistic about those, but they didn't like that at all. Craft, we're all more or less much of a muchness there. And commercial appeal, I'm a bit low on that because at the moment I don't think it's commercially attractive, but it could be. It could be. Straight on to submission number 2. It's called Deep Sleeper. Deep Sleeper. I like that title. I like Tutelar as well. 2 good titles so far on this show. First show of the month. It's from Huck Pallantine. There's a QR code there. Probably Huck's website, but who knows? It could be anything. So get your phone out and see where that goes to. This is action thriller with romantic elements. Something for everyone, eh, Huck? Yeah, looking forward to this. Here's Huck's blurb. Alex Walker, an aging and disgraced former CIA operative, is dragged back from the cold. How often does that happen? By his former paymaster. He's tasked with stopping a ruthless Russian sleeper, intent on eliminating our list of high-value government targets. But Walker quickly realizes this Russian sleeper is not what they seem, and neither is their mission. Walker will end up questioning his past, his loyalties, and the vows he made to his country as he follows this journey to a devastating and unexpected conclusion. Let me tell everybody about you, Huck. I've lived in London for 20 years, bringing up 2 young daughters while holding down a senior role in the security technology sector. I've long wanted to write a novel about 2 aging ex-Cold War operatives, broken people, thrown into conflict, who gradually grow to respect and find solace with each other while battling a larger enemy. How interesting. This novel is the result. A draft was submitted for a novel writing MA, and it received 1 mark short of a distinction. See if we can do better today, eh? Since then, it's been passed to a professional editor for several redrafts, focused on Tiny's plot and the relationship between the characters. And yes, let's see if we can push it 1 point over the edge for your MA with an astoundingly good reading here from Kay.
Deep Sleeper by Huck Pallantine, read by Kay. Prologue. United States House Representative Riley Hagen's residence, 50 miles east of Monterey, California, Thursday, 1:04 a.m. She dragged herself, inch by inch, hand over hand, across the floor, sliding across the sticky blood that ran freely from the knife wound in her back. Behind her, the man who'd stabbed her was striding towards her, his heavy boots clinking against the stone tiles. He didn't rush. There was no haste or panic. He just took one stride after another. She gritted her teeth, pulling her body forward. The nails on her left hand first grated against the stone and then snapped. And then rough hands grabbed her from behind, pulling her upwards. She scratched at the man's eyes, but he batted her arm away easily, balled up his fist, and punched her hard in the jaw. The room spun around her, colours flaring. Barely pausing, he gripped the thick material of her sweater with both hands and threw her across the room. She crashed through the glass partition, crying out as shards punctured her body. Her attacker strode towards her. She had maybe a few seconds left. And then she saw it. The handgun that had clattered across the stone out of her hand when he'd surprised her in the darkness. It was so close, but still just out of reach. The pain was incredible now. It forced out all thought, leaving nothing but the animalistic need to survive. She reached out, fingertips brushing against the handgun's slide. A rough hand took a fistful of her thick hair. In maybe another second, she knew she'd be dragged backwards, screaming. And then her fingers closed around the grip of the handgun. She rolled onto her back, gasping at the sudden pain. He was kneeling over her, his huge frame blocking out the dim light. He gripped her neck with his left hand. Then he saw the gun and his face contorted in a mask of surprise. He raised the knife. She squeezed the trigger. 1, 2, 3 rounds all slamming into his chest. For a long moment the man didn't move. Then he fell forward, and 200 pounds of bone and muscle hit her like a dead weight. She gasped as the air was forced out of her lungs. The handgun fell from her hand, and she pushed at the man's inert body, up and to the side. For a moment she thought she wasn't strong enough. No, knew she wasn't strong enough. She strained every muscle. Somehow she managed to roll him off. She dragged in a breath, then another. And then she remembered. He wasn't the only one there. You're not done. Not yet. She pushed herself up. Her eyes were streaming now, and her entire world quickly became wet prisms. She shook her head, blinking furiously, wiping at her eyes with her forearm. Then she picked up the handgun and rose to one knee. The second man was somewhere in the next room. She took a step forward, and the wall spun around her. She swallowed, tasting blood and bile. Then she lurched forward towards the arched doorway, gripping the wall with her free hand for support. Slowly, she stepped through into the next room and forced herself to focus on the man cowering on the floor in front of her. Congressman Riley Hagan was whimpering, tears running down his face. His steel-rimmed glasses and tan suit were spattered with fresh blood. But none of that blood was his own. Some of it had come from his security detail, both of whom she had killed less than a minute before. Her element of surprise more than a match for their superiority in size, strength and numbers. And then it had gone bad, quickly. The third man, the one who had not been part of the plan, had come out of nowhere, put a kitchen knife in her back, and then had beaten her nearly into unconsciousness. No, the rest of the blood spattered on Riley Hagan's tan suit wasn't his. It was hers. She took in a long, measured breath. Then slowly she raised the handgun.
All right. And what is she going to do with that, we wonder? Well, how did you feel about that, Kaylie?
Wow, that was a pretty captivating opening. If we think about starting with action, there was definitely loads of action there. Taking a step back with the blurb, and I think I saw a comment pop up about this feeling like familiar territory. And I felt that, had I read that on the back of a book, I think I would have felt like it was a story I may have already heard before. So I think it's for this writer, was it Huck, to kind of pull out what is distinctive about their story. And actually, when you were reading the biog about broken people finding solace in one another and fighting something much bigger, that was really interesting, and maybe pulling some of that through into the blurb a little bit more. So that was my first thought. But otherwise, I thought it was really strong, lots of action. There was a bit where I actually gasped. I was like, oh, God. I think the one thing I would say, and I understand it's a prologue, so it's doing more of the scene setting, is there was less sense of character, but actually that did start to come through in those last lines where you start to feel the dynamic between the woman who's holding the gun and the person who's been about to be shot, we assume. So maybe pulling through character a little bit more, but I enjoyed it.
Good, all right. Let's see what the numbers look like. Have you pressed your vote button yet?
Oh, no, I haven't.
Oh, my goodness gracious me. Minus 1 point for not pressing your vote button. Let's just see what... I've got a lot to say about this, actually, but let's before I start wittering on, let's see what Kate thinks.
I was getting pretty gripped by that, actually. Deep sleeper... I gave that quite a high mark, I think, as a title. Yes, I did. I gave it 4 stars across the board. I thought for the kind of thing it is, that title works fine. So Huck's fine there. And likewise, the blurb was very clear. I mean, my sort of trope alarm went bing, 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 because of lots of tropes. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing. Having tropes is not a bad thing, as long as you do something new with them that makes us want to read that. And this felt like genre fiction to me, even though it was kind of a mixture of spy thriller, romance, and the kitchen sink and everything else. I mean, it's a spy thriller, isn't it? And as such, then those kind of tropes are what you expect, and that's partly what makes genre fiction work, really. You want the familiar made new.
Yeah.
So that was my initial thing. Then I thought it was very visceral. I mean, it's a really tropey start with somebody who's seriously injured and they're in some, terrible jeopardy which they've got to get out of. Again, classic tropes, particularly for that kind of genre. And also, sorry, big spoiler alert here, it struck me from the blurb that basically the sleeper agent is female. Is this woman here who's just been knifed?
I think she's our girl. Yeah,
and I think the other guy in there was probably the CIA agent that was referred to that she hadn't dealt with was probably the one that they're going to end up together, aren't they? Now,
we hope so.
Huck, if I'm wrong about that, that's fine, and you've red herringed us nicely. If I'm right about it, you need to change a few details because it's a little bit too obvious. But if you have messed with my head successfully and I've got the wrong end of the stick, that's okay. Carry on as you were. But I thought it was very visceral, and I liked it. It felt very professional in the way that the use of paragraphing and short sentences and dialogue and so on. It all felt like a published work. It
felt very, very competently executed. I think it felt decent.
I thought so too.
I just want to ask you both about
it's different enough is the thing, isn't it? But I was quite gripped by that.
Yeah, I want to ask you both about a comment that Martin made in the Genius Room. He says, "Good Jeopardy. Trouble is, it's happening to strangers." And then he amplifies that and says, "Because we're not caring for the characters yet." Does that make any impact on you?
For me, not so much because it's a prologue. So at this point, I get the sense that we're getting a little vision of something, and we don't want to know too much at this point because it's going to spoil things later on. Because prologues that work for me are the ones that get you intrigued. And don't go on too long. If it goes on and on with strangers, you're going to get bored. But if that was about to end, that prologue, that was fine, because then presumably later in the book we go, yes, that woman who was stabbed on the floor was the Russian agent, and the guy So I don't actually want to know too much about them at that point. I want the kind of, this is the James Bond film bit, isn't it? At the beginning, the jeopardy, the action, apart from Bond, but you don't know the other people involved, but you're getting a taste, a flash, and then you're looking for what's joining that to the rest of the story as you read on. So I don't have a problem with that personally.
You don't have a problem. What about you, Kaylie?
I'm the same, and this is a much better distilled comment that I was trying to make. So I feel the character is being compensated with the action, but I completely agree with Kate. As long as the kind of prologue is ending there and it's not going on too far, and then the next part we read starts delving into character, and then we start becoming really invested. I do think it works, and actually, I was drawn into it, so it is doing its job.
It's doing its job. Fantastic. Jan says didn't mind the like a character connection. I feel like they don't want us to know who we're cheering for yet. That's what Jan does. I mean, I can see both arguments, but I personally would like them to be a bit more than just ciphers. Actually, Huck, because this is a scene we have seen many times before. Actually. I got a rather depressed feeling initially because I thought, oh, geez, it's going to be another rape scene or something like that. And we get a lot of submissions like that, and they're all a bit grim, actually. I think, oh, dear, I don't know, really sort of undistinguished. But you turn it around, and it wasn't like that at all. So that's good. I do need them to more than ciphers. They're not coming alive enough yet. We don't have to be wholly invested in them, but it's got to come alive a bit more for me. And the thing that I picked up actually about your particular strength here is that you do great reveals. And there are actually, in 700 words there are two rather good reveals. Now, what publishers will be looking for, agents will be looking for, will be what's unique about Huck's writing. Now, what can you do really well? What's your one trick? Quite often, best-selling writers have only got one trick, but they're really good at it. And I think this is your trick. I think you do reveals really well. If you want to compare that to Robert Ludlum also does reveals really well. Was he the best as he did? Was he the best wordsmith in the world? Absolutely not. But he did really, really good reveals and made many, many, many megabucks out of it. So I think I'd like to see that front and center. You do them very well there. I think it just needs to be showcased just a little bit more, and then you will get serious publishing interest. The other thing I would say, and I do say this to a number of submissions now, is I think we want to know it's extensible. It's not just a one-off. I think we want to know these characters are going to be around for at least 2 more books, and then I think you've got quite a commercial proposition. Let's look at the numbers here. 69. You're way up there. So we all like the title. I was a bit low on the title, but I actually quite like it. You twist my arm, I might push it up a bit more. You got a low mark from me for the blurb, which I'm not going to explain. You just need to watch the seminar on blurbs, really. But both Kate and the Genius Room are pretty high on the commercial appeal, the bang. And I think if you fix the points I've just mentioned, then I would go that high as well. So it's all looking rather good, I think. Yeah, that's where you go. That's where you go, Huck. Just look at that. Look at that blurb and the seminar, and you'll be there, mate. This is submission number 3. You were pressing ahead like crazy today. Is middle grade fantasy. It's from David, and it's called The Two Worlds of Tom Tinderlee. I like that. I like that title. I've had some good titles today. This is David's blurb. Tom's search for a lost boy brings him into contact with an Obadiah, a time folder, with whom he travels to a children's sanctuary in another world. Tom discovers an ancient secret which spells danger for the sanctuary and leads him on a trail to a creature who feeds on children, Jimmy Savile, and is about to wake from centuries of sleep. It is Jimmy Savile. Oh no. Let me tell you about David. I joined the bar having studied acting at LAMDA, and this book has been influenced by my experience in cases concerned with neglected children who had become trapped in criminal gangs. That's very interesting stuff. I absolutely agree. There's lots of dramatic potential in that. Their attempts to escape and overcome hardship inspired me to write for middle grade readers generally, and this book in particular. And I'm delighted to say I think this is the second reading from Hannah.
The Two Worlds of Tom Tinderlee by David Geey, read by Hannah. Chapter 1, 1955. Tom Tinderlee lived on the top floor of a lonely old narrow house wedged between empty buildings on the edge of town. He had his own room with a bed, a sink, and a little battered sofa with pointed springs that had ripped through the fabric on one side and threatened to jab him if he came too close. The room had no carpet, and the bare floorboards meant he always had to be on the lookout for stray splinters. During the last few weeks of December, Tom had eagerly scratched through the dates on a calendar, and now the day had arrived. It was his 12th birthday, and he had reached an important decision. From now on, no one could call him a child. He picked up a comic a school friend had given him as a present and followed the pictures as they showed the battles between Dan Dare, the comic's hero, and the evil alien known as Mecham. As he turned the pages, he imagined being in a spaceship with Dan Dare by his side, flying from one star to another. This is what he had always wanted to do: travel through space and find planets no one had ever seen. "I'll be a pilot just like Dad," he announced in front of a mirror which was cracked down the middle and split him in two. He folded the comic carefully and hid it behind his bed so it wouldn't be found and taken away. "And Florentine?" he called out. "You here?" He waited for a few moments and, in case she was asleep, raised his voice and called again, but there was no answer. He couldn't hear any snoring and was relieved his Uncle Bert wasn't in. The house was silent as he washed and scraped at the tear-shaped mark just below his right eye. It had always made him embarrassed, and he hoped by rubbing it the mark would fade, or better still, disappear altogether. There was no heating in the room, so he rolled out his shirt and trousers, which had been wrapped together to keep them warm, and got dressed as fast as he could. He had a go at brushing his hair, but as usual there were some clumps that stood up looking like spikes on the top of his head. In the tiny kitchen next to his room, he found an old chunk of hard bread and some cheese, stuffed them in his pocket, and ran downstairs to the front door. Tom left in his usual untidy state. His jumper had holes at the point of his elbows, and his socks, which never matched, had become threadbare. His jacket still felt damp, having been deliberately splashed with water the previous day. The first flakes of winter snow were hanging around the street as he whistled to a stray dog that he'd been forced to keep in an empty shed nailed to the wall next door. Tom had seen it the previous week, whimpering under a bench near the butcher's shop. Its ribs were visible, and it was clearly famished. He had tried to stroke it, but the animal had backed away. Determined to help, he had found a discarded bone, and by keeping it just out of reach, tempted the dog to come forward. "Where's your owner? You shouldn't be out here, you'll freeze," and stroked its matted hair. He named it Charlie, and without a home to go to, the dog had followed him ever since. Tom had brought it into the house, but had been collared by the unwashed, bulbous-nosed Mr. Hogrot, the only other person who lived in the building. "Rules is rules. No dogs in here. Get it out." So Tom had managed to open the door to a coal shed on the house next door and place an old sack on the floor to keep the dog warm. It scampered out of the shed and barked as soon as Tom stepped out of the house. "You're shivering, you poor thing. This is for you," and gave it the bread. "Come on, we'd better get going. Don't want to be late on the last day of term, do we?"
Okay, so let me just say, David, don't just bung us, a few chapters like that, because what you're doing is you're making, let me get right in your face. You're giving us a difficult decision, and actually it boils down to the narrator. And narrators always work so hard to lift manuscripts, get inside them, express them as it's superhuman effort sometimes they make, and sometimes that's reflected in the scoring as well, actually, which we shouldn't do, but we do. So if we ask for 700 words, give us 700 words. You decide, please, where the cutoff point is, and if it's up to our narrator, that's imposing too much of a burden on them. So just a note to everybody. Let's see what the Genius Stream is actually saying about that. Collateral says, if anything, needs to bring forward an inciting incident a little quicker, but still engaging. Hannah, our reader, said, this felt like a good story, struggling to start. It jumped from spaceship to hard bread to dog. And Ancora says, there's a nice voice coming through in this piece, drawing me in. Vicky says, a little too much scene setting, need more action. I wonder, we've got a middle grade specialist here. Her name is Kate. What did you think?
I thought this was really promising, actually. I thought it was a great title. I gave it the full marks for the title.
Oh, right.
That's spot on for a middle grade title. The alliteration, the way that you pair the name of the person with the thing that this is about. I mean, for me, that works well for middle grade, all of that stuff. So that's great. The blurb was also very clear, and I really liked the premise. I thought that was a great premise. A time folder, brilliant. Really want to know about that. Children's sanctuary caught my ear as well. And I was like, oh, why a sanctuary? What do they need saving from? So some really good questions set up in the blurb. So that's really good, David. That. Yes, I agree with the comment in the Genius Room about this is struggling to find a place to start, because the thing about middle grade readers, modern middle grade readers in particular, is that they have a lot less patience than their predecessors had, who didn't have the delights of online video gaming and Netflix at their fingertips and mangas and all sorts of other things that, you know, just go for straight off bang. So starts are kind of more important in terms of hooking in the reader's interest for this age group, really, than perhaps for older readers, I would say. So what I've written here is start with the dog.
Yes.
Because as soon as it started talking about the dog, I thought, yes, I got that.
That's just what Vicky has said. So we got a majority here. Absolutely, go for the dog.
Totally agree with Vicky there. And yeah, because I totally get that all the description you were doing was telling us that, you know, he's relatively deprived, you know, he lives in a rather sort of cheerless kind of place, and, you know, he's up against it and so on. He's got an imagination and he likes space. Okay, but actually I felt you could have started with the dog. Gets the dog, and immediately you can start telling us things about the character of the boy through his interactions with the dog, and then literally on their journey to school, you can have him taking off with Dan Dare and fighting Mekon in his imagination with the dog barking along beside him. And that way you can introduce the idea of his being into space and comic books. And you can pull in the things like you could just use the stuff about, you know, his socks are odd, and, you know, one of his shoes is patched and all that. You can bring all that in then, which should immediately signal to us that this is a kid that comes from, you know, a poor background. So that's my main thinking about that. But I think...
I just want to ask you about Dan Dare. I mean, isn't that impossibly... I mean, do people still read Dan Dare? Isn't that old?
Well, not especially, but he put on the top 1955. Oh, okay. And I think as long as you just say his comic book hero Dan Dare was always fun. You know, you can include a line or so just to make sure that a modern reader, you know, a modern 9-year-old who's never heard of Dan Dare gets the idea, and they would get the idea, because obviously comic books, superheroes and stuff are still very, very much in the forefront of a lot of 9 and 10-year-old readers' minds now.
Yeah, Vagabond's just said something about that as well, about setting it in 1955. Why does it need to be set in 1955? May not be something middle grade readers connect to. No, that's maybe.
I don't agree. I don't agree with that. No, I wouldn't say so. Because there's some. It's basically historical fiction. As soon as you set it, you know, in the last century, which feels really like, oh my god, that feels terrible. I think about it like that, but it's true. It's historical fiction, and that will not necessarily put off a middle grade reader at all, as long as you pick them up and take them along with the character and the story. The fact that it's set in at a different time, not a problem necessarily.
Fantastic. I mean, words. I can see why they call you a word witch. I mean, absolutely brilliant feedback. Thank you so much, Kate. What did this do to your inner child, Kaylie?
I don't know if I can add to what Kate is saying today.
It's very difficult.
It's very difficult. I would completely agree, first off. Really like the title, really like the premise, so that's all great stuff. What I thought was really good, and it's funny because as it was kind of going along, I was like, I don't know if there's something missing, and actually the thought of moving the scene with the dog to the front and then peppering in those signals actually really makes sense to me, because it almost felt like those opening paragraphs, exactly as Kate was saying, there was signals. It was all signals to trying to give us the context of this character. It was, you know, the mattress and the socks and this and this and this, the hard bread, the cheese, and actually that can be peppered in subtly throughout. We don't need to be so explicitly told up front. What this does really nicely though, and really well, was sense of character, like this really nice, empathetic, you know, guy who's, you know, met a dog and putting the dog's needs in front of his. I think that's really, I think that's really nice. And on the point of setting it in 1955, for me, it feels far enough in the past, I assume, for it's a long time, a middle grade reader, a long time ago. But it actually, it's interesting, isn't it? It's different enough. pre-technology, before things that, you know, that age group might be really familiar with. So it's actually taking people back into the past far enough that it feels quite distinctive from the world we know around us. I liked it. I thought it was really strong.
Good. Excellent, fantastic. And let's look at the numbers in that case. You got to press your button there, Kaylie.
Oh.
Yeah. Or maybe you have done. I don't know. It takes a few
Yes.
seconds. It usually takes a few seconds. We're baiting our breath now. See what the numbers are.
Was that number
80, 60,
3 or number
80,
4?
80. She's done it. I can see
Oh,
it.
okay, got it. That's great. That's great. Thank you very much.
Maybe it came to Spain
Wake up,
before it went to
Cox.
London.
Wake up, Cox. Sorry. I've gone a bit low actually on the bang. We've got great marks from Kaylie and Kate on the bang. Not so great in the genius room. I think what's going on quite often is that everyone's so enthusiastic that all I can do really is judge what I see in front of me, and that's all you'll find agents will do, and that's all you'll find publishers will do. And they may sometimes they do. We do. Sometimes we do get overly excited about, you know, the potential of something which can work out rather badly sometimes. So I think, you know, there's a dose of cold air that has to come through sometimes. We just say, what have we got in front of us? Can we take this and publish it right now? Or can I take this right now and sell it to a publisher? And if the answer is no, then the bang, the commercial potential, that's what we got in the last column there, is low from me. Let's see how the number's looking. Okay, well, you know what, David? You're looking pretty good, actually. You're looking pretty good, but Huck is looking even better. An overall mark of 69. I wonder if anyone's going to beat that today. Shall we find out? Submission number 4. Coming up from James. Another, yes, it's a titular Sunday. It's a day of great titles today. Lindaco Pickering and the Lottery Killings. I'm going to say that again. I loved saying it. Lindaco Pickering and the Lottery Killings. And this is older middle grade, 9 to 12. Thank you for the information. Cosy murder mystery. I'm going to ask Kate if 9 to 12-year-olds do actually read cozy murder mysteries. I don't know if they do or not, but we'll find out in a minute. This is James's blurb. What would you do if you won £10 million on the lottery? Use the lead pipe, the candlestick, or the pistol to kill off the other winners. For Harry Boodle, it was raking his chance of finding a new foster family. For his best friend, Lindaco Pickering, the self-proclaimed floating detective, it was a chance to show the world he was more than just a freak who lived in a hot air balloon. Either way, together they need to solve this case to save their lives. Getting an interesting vibe? Let me tell everybody about you, James. Happily enjoying /enduring family life in Wiltshire, England. I've always been on the lookout for a murder mystery to solve. As I knew from NC Beaton, that part of the world is absolutely full of them. Sadly, there were no mysteries and thankfully no murders, so I decided to write one myself. Litopia has kept me fired up to keep going following my previous submission. Good, I'm pleased to hear that. Drowning Fish on the 24th of May 2020. I do remember that, actually. I would love to take the next step forward, and who better to help you take that step than Ali?
Lindaco Pickering and the Lottery Killings by James, read by Alison. Chapter 1, The Last Orphan. What would you do if you won £10 million on the lottery? Use the lead pipe, the candlestick, or the pistol to kill off the other winners? Not what most people ponder after hitting the jackpot, but clearly what one of us was secretly thinking. Honestly, at the start of that day, such thoughts were a million miles away from Lindaco and I. Our biggest concern was finding a family. A new family, please. You know, for love, laughter, and happily ever after. I craved a family so much it made my stomach ache. Until then, however, I had Lindaco. Lindaco Pickering, my brilliant but bizarre best friend, was not very confident about that morning's foster care visit. For one thing, he was 15 years old. Foster parents always choose the cute kid. Nobody wants a teenager. For another, and slightly more of a deal breaker, he lived in a hot air balloon. Funnily enough, that never made a good first impression. In the last 2 years, I'd seen 32 couples reject him. Visit number 33 didn't start very well either. "Here she comes," said Lindaco, his blue eyes twinkling. "Please don't do your Sherlock Holmes thing," I begged. "You know it scares them off." "Harry Boodle," said my friend in mock outrage. "When have I ever frightened off a family?" "Every flippin' time you do your Sherlock scan," I said, edging away from him in the basket. Last month, Mr. and Mrs. Topham Taylor were just about to sign the paperwork for me when Lindaco stated they should be renamed Mr. and Mrs. Topsy-Turvy because her blonde wig was wonky and his trousers were on back to front. The Hoskins family were directors of a toothbrush company and were very impressed with Lindaco, until he suggested they might benefit from a toothbrush themselves, owing to their mouldy fish breath. Lindaco and I hated these foster visits. It was like we were on display at the zoo, or on the shelf at Tesco, strangers browsing for a boy or girl to take home. "Come on then, let's have a look at you," barked Mrs. Keppel, not a cropped grey hair out of place as she marched around our basket. "Stand up straight." We were hovering 6 inches off the ground, but I suddenly wished we were much higher. It was grim. She inspected us closely, poking here, prodding there, as if she was buying a horse. I half expected her to check our teeth. She didn't look impressed. You're not exactly normal foster kids." "Normal is boring," Lindaco shrugged, much to her annoyance. Lindaco lived in the air balloon due to his fear of the ground, some secret trauma I'd yet to get to the bottom of. "I don't like your attitude. One more smart comment from you, and I'm leaving," Mrs. Keppel spat, still circling us. Despite my craving for a family, I prayed Lindaco would make a comment. "You boys should be grateful I've even visited. You're taking precious time away from my office work." Lindaco said, "Office work?" "Yes, you little brat," she snapped. "I've been working in the office all morning." With a twitch of his nose, Lindaco said, "Then how do you explain the sand in your hair and the pink flip-flops?" She didn't even reply as she roared back down the driveway. Lindaco and I were the last 2 kids at the children's home. How did it feel watching all our friends drive off with their happy new families? Remember that feeling being picked last for sports? Multiply that by 1,000 and you're still nowhere near it. Our biggest fear above all else, neither of us wanted to be the last orphan. We wanted a new life, away from here. Maybe that was why we agreed to play the lottery that night. A winning ticket is supposed to offer you a significantly better life. For us, it offered to significantly shorten our lives. We were targets. Why did someone want to murder the pair of us? Looking back, I can think of 10 million reasons. But for once, maybe his Sherlock skills could actually help us solve the case to save our lives.
Lots of reaction in the Genius stream. Martin says inventive. I totally agree. I think it's really original, actually. Hannah is engaged. Eva says, even the humour, but I still don't understand the relationship with the 2 MCs. Lindaco says Martin sounds like a brand of tennis balls. Does a bit. Vicky says, got a Roald Dahl feel to it. Johnny, not an expert on the age, but seems quite authentic, the target. I think we need to cover that story straight away, actually. So let's go straight back to Kate for a view on that. Sorry about that. But you are, amongst many other talents you have, you are a school librarian. So tell us about the targeting here that James is going for. 9 to 12.
Yeah, well, first of all, Cosy Mysteries, absolutely, yes, most definitely.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, for that age group, they can really get into them. And in fact, my own daughter has she's 11, by the way, so she's bang on the target readership. And she's discovered in the last sort of few months or so murder mysteries and absolutely loves them.
Okay.
Her friend, who is also 11, is happily reading Agatha Christie. So there you go.
Wow.
And I remember getting into Agatha Christie around that age as well. So murder mysteries for this age group can work absolutely great. There are some really good ones around at the moment. And So you've got to be a little bit careful about how you go about this, so you're not just replicating what's out there, because Robin Stevens has written a fantastic series called Murder Most Unladylike, and it's set in an all-girls boarding school in, I think it's the 1930s, for this age group. And then there's also another one called Scarlet and Ivy by Sophie Cleverly, which is set similar time, again, all girls. So girls in particular love murder mysteries. Now, I really like the idea of this is young Sherlock Holmes, but now young Sherlock Holmes has been done, but this is a different take on the idea. Instead of saying this is the young Sherlock Holmes, we're saying this is somebody who's like that, and this is being written from the Watson perspective, isn't it? The same as the original Sherlock Holmes. So I get the idea, and I like the idea. So let's start quickly with the title, which is quite reminiscent of a Sherlock Holmes.
Yes,
Lindaco
it is.
Pickering is an absolutely brilliant name, sticks in the mind, great choice. And the lottery, Lindaco Pickering and the Lottery Killings works exactly the same way as the last title that I liked it. So I've given it 100% again, because great. That's the sort of thing you need. Nice bit of alliteration again. The blurb I gave a 3-2. Again, there's some nice ideas there. The Cluedo reference, not sure. Some kids will be familiar with that, but an awful lot more probably won't.
Yeah.
My family happens to play Cluedo quite regularly, so we're well up with our candlesticks and ropes and all that. They don't do the lead piping in modern Cluedo sets,
Do they
by the
not?
way.
What do they do instead?
No, don't get that anymore. Oh gosh, what do you get? You get a trophy. You get a dumbbell. Yeah, because there's a gym now in the mansion. Yeah, because it's a gym, gymnasium. Yeah.
Wow. That's
no more
lockdown,
lead
I
pipes.
suppose,
Sorry,
isn't it?
sorry,
Everyone's got
Cluedo
their own home
fans.
gyms and stuff, yeah.
But anyway, so and I think with the opening, it needed for me. I was struggling to get interested in Lindaco, which is a bit of a shame, because clearly Lindaco is the pivotal character, even though it's not from Lindaco's perspective. I didn't find myself particularly liking or relating to Lindaco. I think actually go for the Sherlock Holmes things more overtly. Instead of having him just come across as a bit sassy to this nasty old woman that comes in, I think do the Sherlock Holmes things, but in a very courteous way. I see you've got some ink on your fingers. You must be, but do really go for it in a way that's going to completely share the magic of Sherlock and his process, his deductions.
And that can freak people out as well,
with
can't
the
it?
younger readership. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It wouldn't need to be remotely sassy, and could just be completely disconcerting. And you could almost start with "Here she comes," that statement, and then you can have a line or two about which gives us the message that they're in an adoption home, they're in an orphanage or whatever. And then you can gradually feed in stuff as you go, which would give us more of a sense of the characters, and that would be better, because this felt like there was too much internal monologue. I get that we need the voice of the narrator, but I felt there was a bit too much of that. We needed to sort of get going, really, as it did start to, and be drawn into the characters by Lindaco's deductions and by the slightly exasperated admiration of the point of view character.
Yeah, but it's nice setting, don't you think? So it tugs at the heartstrings a bit too. So pick me, please. Sort of pound puppy sort of thing. I like that a lot.
I think somebody in the Genius Room mentioned Roald Dahl, and there's that Sophie in the BFG, in the orphanage, and then that horrible, super nasty woman that comes. That's very Roald Dahl, isn't it? All that
It's got that feeling.
Kids like a bit of that.
So you've given some pretty good marks across the board there, Kaylie.
I really enjoyed this. So I liked the voice, the strength of the voice, and it felt like very tight writing. Right from, this has been well edited, so that would be my first comment. I feel like this writer is overly wedded to that opening line, which also appeared in the blurb, and it's how I interpret it is one of those things that you write and then you really like it, so you feel like you want to keep putting it in there. But for from the outsider, I'm not entirely sure it works. It's nice, but I feel like it's almost misdirecting us.
Yeah.
It's like, what would you do if you won $10 million, or sorry, whatever it was?
Yeah,
and then
pounds,
it's like
it's
the
British.
candlestick, the lead
Yeah.
piping. It's like, oh, I'm not quite sure really what this means.
Hmm.
So I would have to think about that. It's you know,
Mind you, I guess it's the Cluedo Killers, isn't it? Hasn't somebody done that already? Someone must have done the Cluedo Killers. But apparently, also might be sort of trademark issues there too. Actually, I don't know. But yeah.
Watch out for the lawsuit. Yeah, I just wasn't quite sure. I don't want to give bad advice, but that was my kind of feeling. I liked the relationship between the two characters, but would agree with what Kate said, kind of instill a few other bits in there. The bit I really enjoyed the most was where he talked about calling the potential fostering couple Mr. and Mrs. Topsy-Turvy, and those funny lines, because I think kids really, well, I say kids, you know, younger age groups really appreciate humour and kind of poking fun at things. So I think, you know, really, really dial that up where you can. But I really enjoyed this.
That is your inner 9-year-old at work. Absolutely. I totally agree with that as well.
Still holds true.
Yeah. Let's see what the numbers are looking like here. Is everybody... oh, my goodness, James. Yes. Lots of enthusiasm there. I think, I mean, Kate's given you a very, very good analysis. She's on top form today. Never known her not to be, actually, but it's still worth mentioning. And I think it's nicely original, actually. I think there's a lot of potential in this. Possibly a show winner. Possibly. But we don't know until we see the next submission. And before we do that, let's just... Oh, Ebony is here, but she's because of Branson's wretched internet company that can't actually manage to get itself together. She's having to communicate with us via mobile phone, and that's not good enough for the connection. But she's with us in spirit. Thank you very much. And Ebony, that's a comment on Huck's submission, which is a previous one. And thank you very much for that, Ebony. And Huck says thank you too, which is brilliant. So let's look at submission number 5, our last on the day. Crime thriller. It's from Mike, and it's called The Girl in the Pines. The Girl in the Pines. And this is Mike's blurb. Hart finds a body in the forest above her new home. The girl died of a drug overdose and may have been involved with Hart's grandfather. When he's arrested, Hart tries to clear his name. Soon, Hart is involved in a murky world of drugs, gangs, and cover-ups for an environmental poisoning. She discovers a small mining town can have as much darkness and as many secrets as the big city. But as she unravels the mystery, her own secret is uncovered and life becomes dangerous. Let me tell everybody about you, Mike. I'm a graduate of the New Writing South novel writing course. I've previously been represented by Fraser Russ for a children's book called Mishka. I produced and directed 2 low-budget films and a documentary, A Stiff Upper Lip. How very British. The documentary, but I don't think you are Brit. The documentary was shown at various film festivals and was selected as one of the best of the fest at the San Francisco Doc Fest. That's fantastic. Silver medal awards. Silver medal in the 2020 Reader's Favourite International Book Award. Semi-finalist in the Kindle Book Review Awards 2021. Quarter-finalist in the Book Life Awards 2021. Very promising, good, solid stuff. Let's see if we can push you forwards a little bit too, with a fabulous reading from Johnny.
The Girl in the Pines by Mike Maroney. Read by John. Badlands. The baking sun sucked every last drop of moisture from the world. The gas gauge hovered over empty, and the road that stretched away disappeared into the shimmering desert haze. Jesus, Mom, we gotta stop, said Hart. The car slowed to a halt next to an empty parking lot. Nancy drummed her fingernails on the wheel before turning to the back seat. What do you think, Hal? Hal put down his Bible and gazed at the road ahead. The highway to hell is broad, and the gate is wide for many who choose that way. What the fuck does that mean? Said Nancy. It means you have to be a fucking idiot to head out into the desert with no gas, said Hart, thankful that Hal had backed her up. Nancy scrabbled in her bag and then in the glove compartment. You got any money? No, said Hart, the backup money hot in her sock. Nancy jammed her foot on the accelerator and screeched onto the heat-cracked concrete of the parking lot and pulled to a halt in the far corner, under the shadow cast by 3 large billboards. It was quiet when the engine stopped. The only sound was the chirp of crickets. Pass me my lucky dress, will you? Nancy said to Hal as she took off her t-shirt and bra, her brown nipples pressed against the thin fabric of the short white muslin hippie tunic she pulled on. Wish me luck. She fluffed her long blonde hair and slunk off towards the stained white brick sports bar on the other side of the parking lot. Do you think she'll come back? Asked Hal. She'll come back, said Hart, as she turned on the radio. Maybe she won't. Remember that time in Preston? Said Hal. I remember. Preston was a little harbour village, pastel-painted cottages on a clear blue sea. The memory made Hart squint and rub her eye. You think we can go back to the city soon? Not for a while, said Hart. Gabriel's all bent out of shape over what Mom did. Said he'd cut her face if he got his hands on her. A song she liked came on the radio, and Hart turned up the volume. Guitars and drums drifted on the air as she remembered Gabriel's fury. He wanted Nancy as his property, and she'd laughed at the idea. They had lit out of the city with all sorts of hot threats burning after them. The song cut out. News just in of a shooting in Pine Bluff. The report lasted a minute. An estranged husband, a family barbecue, booze, anger, and an automatic had left his wife, his 4 kids, his wife's sister, and mother dead. More on this when we get it. The guitars and drums faded back, but Hart turned the radio off. In the heat, time passed slowly as molasses in an hourglass. The seconds dipped into minutes, the minutes dripped into an hour. Red dust blew on the hot air through the open doors, and the sun cooked the inside of the car. What are you reading? Said Hart. Leviticus. What's it say? We are all sinners that need putting to death, said Hal. 3 years ago, Nancy had put Hal on to preaching, and Hart marvelled at how he'd stuck at it. He was 10, but he kept teasing bits out of his Bible and into his mind. Come on, let's check out the town. Hart peeled her damp back off the fake leather seat, and Hal put away his Bible and followed her like he always did. The town was no more than 20 shops lining either side of the highway. Beyond that, a mess of ugly suburbs, studded with white churches that stood among the drab beige houses like tombs in a forgotten graveyard. Shitsville, said Hart. She forgot the name. Even with the welcome to signpost in front of her, her mind refused to waste energy forming a memory. Some towns and some people were like that. Nothing.
Straight to the genius room. Martin says Bible reading Howl is immediately memorable. Galadriel says the story opening is better than the blurb. Johnny, who's our narrator, this is easy to read and it drew me in from the start. I thought that was a brilliant reading, actually, Johnny. Vagabond, somebody says, like this. Galadriel, dialogue, description, action, all balanced. I'm hooked, says Galadriel. But the question is, are you hooked, Kaylie?
I was really pleasantly surprised when we jumped into the story. I think the blurb needs some work. It felt a little bit fragmented, and there was the line may have been involved with her grandfather. I think that's what I wrote down. It was something like that, and it sort of was a bit clunky. So I think that needs some work, and it was all kind of, then it was about mines and this and crime, and I was a little bit unsure of the flow of the story. I got a sense of the story, but it felt a little bit clunky, so just a bit of a work through on that. But the story itself I thought was brilliant. It was quite familiar territory in kids traveling on journey, obviously kind of bit of a disruptive lifestyle. Mum goes into bar, don't know when they're going to come back. She's obviously in well, I say obviously, appears to be an unreliable character kind of in that parental role. But I didn't mind any of that because I thought the dialogue and the sense of story really shone through, and I think the dialogue itself is actually the strongest point and sense of character. And I agree with the comment about kind of the person who's reading the Bible. I thought that was really original and what makes this distinctive. And the more that you can pull that through, that's what makes the story stand out. So I felt like this was strong and well put together.
All right. Okay, thank you, Kaylie. Me too. It's kind of picaresque, actually. I mean, when you sort of analyse it, not much is really happening here, but I'm hooked. I want to read on. I don't know if that's true of Kate, though.
No, it is true of me, actually. I've written voice and I've put a ring around it because there's a definite voice coming through. I mean, I really liked the prose was great, I thought. It was spare, but I felt like I was there. I immediately had this feeling of dusty road and old parking lot by the gas station, all this kind of thing. I really felt like I was there. The dialogue was great. It was really felt believable, really authentic. This is a character-driven story, isn't it? Because that came through immediately, those three characters. I also loved the Bible quoting Howell. I mean, that was such a wonderful piece of comedy, his response, and then Hart's translation of the response. That was really great. It was just a really nice, quirky moment that immediately makes you want to know more about the characters. And then the fact that it's only 10, which emerges a little bit later on, and you're like, what the heck? So yeah, I was really carried along by the characters more than anything else. And I think if you can do that so quickly, then you've really got something going on there. Something that did kind of make me go meh, though, was nipples. Oh, for goodness sake. This immediately said, this is a man writing about a female, and you have to mention the bloody nipples. It's like, no, but we don't think about the t-shirt going over our nipples. We don't. It's a part of our body.
Well, some people
and I know that the opposite sex tend to be a bit obsessed by them, but seriously, that was the one bit that came out of me is saying, oh, stop it. Take that line out, honestly.
Okay, all right,
somebody's
fair enough.
Just, putting on a t-shirt or whatever, then just put on a damn t-shirt.
It's a Tarantino moment, isn't it? Really,
that was the only thing that kind of made me grind my teeth, because it just happens all the time. And as a female reader, it just really kind of grinds your gears after a while, because it's like, come on. However, that aside, I thought it was really good. It came across to me more as road movie than crime thriller.
Yeah, it's very picaresque. Very picaresque, I think. Yeah. But I would,
a lot of good stuff there.
And would you read on?
Yes.
I would absolutely read on. Good. All right. So what we need to do now, because we are reaching the end of the show, is we need to look at the numbers there. And I think it's Johnny. I was troubled. I don't understand that. I don't understand it.
He was troubled with mentioning nipples, Pete.
Oh, right. Oh, really? Oh.
Because he had to read it out.
I'm totally unreconstructed then. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, my goodness.
Johnny's a gentleman.
I'm the only paleolith here. Oh, right. Okay, because I quite enjoyed that, but never mind. All right. So moving on from that, what we think, actually, Mike, is that your blurb probably has let you down. I think the general reaction, you've got pretty low votes on that blurb. You've got great votes on the craft. Great votes. And
look, we all agreed, didn't we?
We all agreed. In fact, actually, the Genius Room has voted even higher on the craft, and we like the commercial potential of that too. There were some comments in the Genius Room about the girl who, the girl is, possibly could be a bit more original as a title, possibly, but. You fix that blurb, and I think you're going to rock and roll. So we now need to look at the overall score being the end of the show. And first submission from Mayank, 51. Second submission from Huck, 69. Third submission from David, 68. Last submission just there from Mike, 69, let down by the blur, but we do have a clear winner, which is submission number 4. Yes, it is. Lindaco Pickering and the Lottery Killings. Well done, James. Very pleased about that. Very, very pleased about that. Strong show, great titles today. great guests today as well. We will be bringing you by hook or by crook, even if we have to, I don't know, get a steam internet connection out there to Ebony. We will be bringing you Ebony and her interest. A fascinating story, actually, of a publishing company that's completely crowdfunded. How interesting is that? Another option. All these options are opening up now. They weren't here just a few years ago, but they are now. We want to know how people do it and how it works for them. Well, we will find out from Ebony very soon. Thank you so much, Kate, for not just for being a fabulous booker and producer for the show, but also today for standing in the last minute for Ebony, which is really appreciated. Thank you, our other wonderful special guests as well, which of course was Kaylie, who I think is building a rapidly building a fan club. Thank you, Rachel, for also booking. Thank you so much, Emily, and the fantastic team of narrators. I'm going the whole hog today, saying thank you to everyone behind the scenes, and you can tell there's a lot of people. Thank you to the genii in the Genius Room, who are actually really the heart and soul of the show. And thank you most of all to the writers who send us your work, without whom, of course, there would be no publishing business. Let's not forget that, and let's see you again same time next week.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
All young men with suits and ties, just sitting in the crowd smoking big cigars. I hope you're ready for what's coming now. I'm the one, I'm the lady that will bring you down. There's a joint on the corner where the big boys play, where the whiskey's running like the river, but they all never come for the booze and bass. I'm the one, I'm the lady that'll rock this place. That'll rock this place. That'll rock this place. Rock this place. Rock this place. Rock this corner where the big boys play.